A new study questions the accuracy of continuous glucose monitors. Find out the details here today on Jimmy Rants. Click on that little box down there in the corner. It will take you straight to IGTV for today's episode. JimmyRants.com is the website, and as always, you can engage live in the content. Go follow me. I'm over on Instagram. I am at Living Low Carb Man, LIVINLOWCARBMAN. Once you're there, engage live in the content. We are here Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, pretty much all the time. Unless I tell you otherwise, I will always be here 11 a.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. We also simulcast over here on my Facebook page, so thank you guys for being here today, as well as over on YouTube with the live stream. Thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. If you missed the live, you can watch it on replay over on IGTV. As soon as this is over, it does go over there right up to IGTV, so you can watch all the past episodes there. We also throw them over on YouTube. Just type in the keyword Jimmy Rants, you will find the show. We also have a very special edition of the Living La Vida Low Carb show, which is the best of Jimmy Rants. Those air on Tuesdays, so pay attention. Tomorrow we talked about the COVID-19 school things. So a lot of kids are going back to school now. So I recently did an episode, reading about all the kinds of things that they're going to make the kids do to be in the school, as well as the tragic story about so many kids who are killing themselves because of the isolation and lack of socialization during COVID-19. So that will air tomorrow on the Living La Vida Low Carb Show podcast, LLVLC.com. But JimmyRants.com is the home ship, the mothership for Jimmy Rants, and you can go check that out to see all the past episodes. And while you're there, support our Patreon. I'm getting a lot of new Patreon followers. People love the work I'm doing here, and if you love it, go make a donation of any amount. Would be greatly appreciated. And I'm working on all kinds of little perks for you guys. So currently giving you early access to my podcast interviews in video format. We'll soon be doing exclusive Jimmy Rants episodes just for my Patreon followers. And I might be doing a giveaway real soon too. So I've written a few books, just a couple of books. So I will probably be doing some exclusive giveaways just for my Patreon. So go sign up, guys, over at JimmyRants.com. Click on the Patreon link, and it really helps keep me on the air. Okay, you guys, today I want to talk about a topic that maybe you've seen people out there in the keto community, carnivore community, wearing on their arms. So have you seen those people that have the little white thing on their arm? It's like this big piece of plastic. That is called a continuous glucose monitor, a CGM for short. And so CGMs are becoming more and more popular. I remember when I first started trying to test blood sugar, I heard about CGMs over in Europe. So they've been in Europe for a very long time. The Freestyle Libre has been the name brand by Abbott that has been out there for a little while. And it's the Freestyle Libre that it basically goes in your arm. Yes, it's a needle, so don't freak out. People freak out about that needle. It's really not a big deal. But the needle goes in your arm in this little plastic encasing, and it stays on there for 2 weeks. And literally on a whim, all you have to do is put your reader, most people use their phone, but you just swipe it over the top of it, and it gives you your current blood sugar on a whim, whenever. So it's very invaluable data for before you eat meals, postprandial kind of blood sugar readings, so you can see how your body responds to various foods you eat. It lets you see what happens post-exercise, which it almost always goes up. People freak out about that, but you see that data. You get to see the way stress responds in your body. And part of the problem with all of these little devices that we use is people think they are the gospel truth. They think that they're infallible and that you test your blood sugar and that's absolutely what your blood sugar is. And let me tell you, as somebody that has used a lot of blood sugar devices, ketone devices, pretty much every little nerdy biohacking type of tool, I've used them all over the years. And that's what they are. They're just a tool. You don't need to be making any rash decisions just based on any information that you see on these devices. They are apt to fail. They are still only devices and tools. I'm currently charging my Oura Ring, but my Oura Ring messed up twice last week, did not provide accurate information. It showed I went to bed at like midnight and I went to bed at like 8. And so it doesn't always give you a clear message of exactly how you're doing. But what it does do, especially in the case of blood sugar readings, is it gives you the trend. And that's what you're looking for, is the trend. So continuous glucose monitors are invaluable. The problem is most people think it's only for someone with diabetes who should be using them. But now people are waking up and saying, oh, I can see what my blood sugar is on a whim. I'll pop one of these things in my arm and have it in there for 2 weeks and do all kinds of experiments with it. And that's what a lot of people are doing. So non-diabetics are using CGMs to see how they're doing. And I think that's wonderful. I think it's the wave of the future. The only thing left as an inhibitor of using these more prolifically is to stop making them by prescription only. I mean, it makes no sense at all that you have to go down to a pharmacy with a prescription to get these little sensors to put a needle in your arm when you can go over to the shelf and you can get the exact same testing device as far as like testing your blood sugar, but it's only single-use finger pricks. Why is that one okay, but this one that lasts for 2 weeks and is a lot easier because you just have one needle that goes in and stays in, why is that one suddenly a prescription? So that's a whole nother story for a whole nother day. But if you're just joining us, I want to read from a new study. Yes, they have been studying people using CGMs that are not diabetic. And this one, when I read it, I knew right off the bat when I saw who the researcher was that this was not going to be a good study. But I wanted to read it to you guys nonetheless, because the claim by this study is that continuous glucose monitors are just too imprecise to give any relevant blood sugar data. And again, I've repeated it over and over and over again that, okay, fine, there are imprecisions from time to time. That doesn't mean it's not valuable. But let's see what the study has to say. Let me tell you who the study author is. I've mentioned his name before. Kevin Hall is his name. And Kevin Hall is a world-renowned researcher in the world of nutritional health. He's from the NIH. In fact, this specific study was funded, there was a funding supported by the Intramural Research Program of the National Institutes of Health, which is where he works, the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Diseases. And so they're the ones that kind of gave the support for this. And they wanted to see what the accuracy was on these CGMs. You know, and Kevin Hall, he's not a fan of ketogenic diets. He's not a fan of the insulin hypothesis. He is a calorie hypothesis guy. So when you know that about a researcher, every single research paper he's ever done dismisses insulin and pretty much any hormonal connection to weight and health and says it's all about an energy balance. So he's a calories guy. So would a calories guy give you a fair assessment of a continuous glucose monitor? No, a calories guy doesn't give a rip about glucose because it doesn't fit within the model of what he's trying to show in his research. So keep that in mind as I'm reading this study. And it's unfortunate that the biases of specific researchers, which if you didn't know that about Kevin Hall, you would read this and go, oh my gosh, am I doing good or bad with CGM? And this kind of underscores why research and the context of it, of who funded it, who's doing the research, their biases, their previous research, all of that matters. You can't just look at a headline of a research paper and think that it's giving you the whole story. But let's look at this one anyway. So this was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, which is a very prestigious journal. Kevin Hall has moxie with them because he's a part of the NIH. And so, the NIH has a researcher doing a study. Of course, the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition will publish it. And this just came out a couple weeks ago. Imprecision nutrition Different simultaneous continuous glucose monitors provide discordant meal rankings for incremental postprandial glucose in subjects without diabetes. So let me translate that gobbledygook. So he used a few CGMs just to kind of get a gauge for what was going on, and they wanted to see how high the glucose would go up post-meal in people that didn't have diabetes. That's what he said. All right, the background. High postprandial glucose may increase risk for disease. Individuals have widely varying glucose responses to different meals, and precision nutrition approaches often seek to personalize the diet to minimize this postprandial glycemic response as measured by a CGM. However, it is unknown whether different CGM devices result in a concordant meal ranking according to the postprandial glycemic excursion. So they're trying to see what is the accuracy of these CGMs. So the objective in the study was to explore whether meal rankings according to postprandial glycemic excursions differed between two simultaneously worn CGMs. So apparently they wore one CGM on one arm, one CGM on the other arm, and they wanted to see if there was any difference. Maybe they did really close on the same arm. I will tell you that when I have interviewed over the years some of the best diabetes experts, including the great Dr. Richard Bernstein, I had him on one time, and he said, don't expect to have blood from your arm, blood from your finger, blood from a toe, blood from your ear. There's different places you could prick, and for it to be the same reading, because it's different parts of the body that the blood flow is going through. Now you would think, okay, whatever the number is down on your foot would be the same as it is on your ear, and it's not. There's different levels of glucose concentrations wherever you prick. So if you do prick your finger or prick your arm or whatever, try to be precise and keep it in the same place. Well, the good news about a CGM, the needle don't move. So what it's measuring the same place all the time. Okay, so what were the methods? They collected 27,489 simultaneously measurements from Dexcom G4. So that's one of the more advanced kind of CGMs. I used a Dexcom one time. I think it was the G3 that I used. I didn't like it. It was a lot of abnormalities in the blood sugar reading. You had to constantly recalibrate it with a finger prick. The whole point of using a CGM is so you don't have to finger prick, but I ended up having to finger prick all the time to get accurate readings. And then the other one is the Abbott Freestyle Libre. And so they did 28 inpatient days in 16 adults without diabetes. Simultaneous glucose measurements obtained for 2 hours following 760 ad libitum meals were used to compare within subject meal ranking between the CGM devices according to their glucose response. So what were the results? Postprandial responses to ad libitum, that means they can eat as much as they want, meals were highly variable. The Abbott and Dexcom systems resulting in within subject incremental mean of glucose. Looks like one measured the mean as 91.7. The other one's mean was 94.2, so that's pretty close. Within subject meal rankings for incremental glycemic responses were relatively discordant, though, with a mean Kendall rank correlation coefficient of 0.43. Not real sure what that means. Meals in the bottom compared with those in the top half ranked by Abbott resulted in 50 plus 10% less glycemic reduction as measured by Dexcom. Okay, that's a lot of kind of gobbledygook. Don't get lost in the weeds. What they're basically saying is they didn't read accurately, that there was too much discrepancy between the two meters, and so therefore neither meter is useful, is what they're going to say in the conclusion here in a minute. And I don't think that's true. I think the Dexcom has major accuracy issues. But I think the Freestyle Libre is pretty darn close. And if we're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater just because you're measuring two CGMs simultaneously and one of them is not performing as well as the other, why is that the fault of the one that's performing well? I think the Freestyle Libre does good. Now, I know there's this NutriSense one that's out there that's a lot of people are using in the keto and carnivore community. I have not used that one yet. I have been contacted by that company, but I have not heard back from them yet. So I haven't personally used that one. But I think a better one would be Freestyle Libre as the established accurate one, and then put on the Nutrisenseo or whatever it's called on the other arm, and then make that comparison. But what Kevin Hall did was he compared the Dexcom, which I think is horrible, with the Freestyle Libre. So they're saying it missed glycemic reduction post-meal, and that created majorly incomplete data. So the conclusion is precision nutrition approaches that use CGMs to personalize meal recommendations for minimizing glycemic excursions may be premature, given that there is such discordance of within subject meal rankings between simultaneously worn continuous glucose monitors. More research is needed to clarify the source of this imprecision. More research is needed. No, you tested the wrong CGM, Kevin Hall. I don't see how they can do this with a straight face and pretend like a CGM is anything but a good thing. Plus, you wouldn't do this with a glucose monitor. Even Dr. Bernstein, when I've interviewed him a couple times on the Live and La Vida Low Carb show, he said, if you're gonna get a glucose meter, get one and stick with the one. Even if it's imprecise, at least you get the correlation with the same meter. What happens is people take a meter, and they do the same thing with ketone meters. You test your blood with one meter and you get one reading, then you test your blood with another meter and you get a totally another reading, and you're confused about what your actual number is supposed to be. And that's why when you find a blood glucose meter, don't change it. Stick with the same one, test using that same meter, and you're gonna get, at least from a relative perspective, what the change is in your numbers. And that's what I'm looking for. Like, I've worn the Freestyle Libre before, and I've gotten down, especially during fasting, I've gotten down to the 50s on the Freestyle Libre. And people are like, oh, it's not a legit number. Freestyle Libre is notorious for being under what it actually is. And okay, fine. I'm not actually looking at it to show me that I had a 54 blood sugar reading during a fast. I'm looking at it to see, okay, am I having any rises in the glucose? Am I having any changes whatsoever? Most of the time, it's just boring because it just basically stays the same all the time. But when I work out, boom, it spikes. When I have stress, like an acute stress, disturbing phone call, for example, boom, it goes up. Those are the kinds of things that are interesting to see wearing a continuous glucose monitor. And whether the numbers are absolutely correct or not is irrelevant. You're looking for the change. Now, if you're trying to manage disease like diabetes, especially type 1 diabetes, you want as precision accuracy as possible. I totally agree. But even Kevin Hall in his study says these are non-diabetic people. So if you're not a diabetic, you really just want to see what is the change that's happening. Now, if on the CGM, you're suddenly seeing 110 and it stays 110 or 120, okay, yeah, that's telling you some good information. But if it goes down in the 70s, it doesn't mean anything. And especially when I did the fasting and it got down in the 50s, oh my God, you're in major hypoglycemia. I said, I'm not worried about it because it's probably not truly 50s. It's probably closer to like 70s and 80s. So again, use that information for what it's worth. But people like to make these things the gospel truth, and they just don't do that. All right, so let's get into this. Postprandial glucose is believed to play an important role in health and disease. So postprandial, remember, after eating your blood sugar. Different meals result in widely varying post-meal glucose excursions that may depend on differences between individuals as well as their meals. Precision nutrition approaches are being developed to personalize an individual's diet to minimize postprandial glycemic responses measured using CGM. So what I do love about this study is they're highlighting something that I think has needed to be highlighted for a while. And that is, we all need personalized nutrition approaches for the individual. if you haven't heard the word bio-individuality, it exists. It means all of us have different ways to eat. Now, you can generally have a template like keto, like carnivore, like paleo that you can follow. But for the most part, you won't know what your individualized meal plan is unless you're testing blood sugar after you eat. So if you think you can eat paleo and you have a sweet potato in your meal and you test your blood sugar using a continuous glucose monitor and you see your blood sugar start 85 and at 1 hour postprandial with that continuous glucose monitor, you see your blood sugar is 175, I think you realize that's not a good way for you. And you have to back off on that kind of food. It's invaluable information, which again, I wish the CGMs were available over the counter because more people need these in their hands and using them so they can get this data in real time. Let's say you're carnivore and you're worried about eating too much protein and maybe you'll have a blood sugar response from that. Well, wear a CGM. And if you test your blood sugar postprandial and at baseline it was 85, but then postprandial 1 hour it was only 89, okay, you realize you're not having a big response to that. That's invaluable. One of the ones that I've noticed lately, because I do have a response to protein, I did an experiment where I ate a pound of chicken and I wanted to see what it would do to my blood sugar, and it went from 82 at baseline, and at 30 minutes postprandial it was up to 87, but then it crashed hard at 1 hour postprandial. It was down in the low 70s. It got as low as the upper 60s, and it was at the 2.5 hour mark that it got somewhat close to baseline again. But I wouldn't have known that data had I not been wearing the CGM. Now, I felt bad, so I knew something bad was happening. I had hypoglycemia happen. Moral of that story, if you eat chicken, eat it with fat and it will blunt that effect. But that was hypoglycemia. It's not that it spiked my blood sugar, but it tanked it. Again, I would have only had to guess that that's what happened based on my feelings had I not been wearing a CGM that gave me that data. So you see how invaluable this little device can be. By the way, if you want to get a CGM, you need to ask your doctor for a prescription. Hey, I want to get some continuous glucose monitors. Can you write a prescription? Now, it's not covered by your insurance or anything. You will have to pay out of pocket. The little sensor, at least the Freestyle Libre one, is $70. I'm not sure what the NutriSense one costs, but you can look those things up on your own. But definitely well worth it if you want to see how foods impact your body. All right, so back to the study. Such approaches have been criticized, talking about testing your blood sugar with a continuous glucose monitor. And it's unclear to what extent different CGMs might measure different glycemic responses to the same meals in the same individual. In other words, it's unknown whether different CGMs could be discordant, such that trying to create a personalized diet that minimizes glucose according to the measurements by one CGM may not result in similar low postprandial glucose obtained by another. So they're concerned, and this is why they did the study, that people will use one specific CGM and it gives them incorrect data, and thus they don't make the correct changes. Now, I can appreciate that they want to try to help people not have imprecise data, but I think that's the wrong way to go about it. I think you need to teach people, okay, let's try to get the highest quality CGM that you can find, and then stick with that one CGM for the trend. Again, these are non-diabetics, so nobody's going to be harmed by this. And I can tell you, I've worn many a CGM now. The most imprecise from a finger prick I've ever seen is 20 points. Okay? So let's say it gives you a 75 as your starting blood sugar. That means it could be as high as 95. It could be in the 80s. But you start with 75. Then you eat some food. Let's say you have a sweet potato and you have insulin resistance and you have a sweet potato and you want to see how does that respond in me. You start at 75 and at 1 hour postprandial, it's at 145. Well, if it was 20 points off, that's 165. The point is you saw the jump. And that's the information you're looking for. Not an absolute number. You don't have type 2 diabetes, and you most certainly don't have type 1. Type 1, this does not apply to you because you need as precision as you can get. And so look for a non-diabetic to just look for trends. And that's what you're looking for, is the trend. To explore this issue, they analyzed CGM data in adults without diabetes who wore both a Dexcom G4 Platinum and the Abbott Freestyle Libre Pro CGM systems over 28 days in an inpatient study. Inpatient meaning they were in-house at the NIH Clinical Center. So they were all locked up in a center for 28 days. We previously reported the primary outcome of the study, which was the difference in ad libitum energy intake between two experimental diets provided in random order. I talked to you about that study previously. Totally bogus study based on the calorie hypothesis and not hormones. All right, so the methods. The study protocol was approved by the Institutional Review Board of the National Institute of Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Disease. Oh yeah, by the way, Kevin Hall runs that. So there it is. The test subjects were between the ages of 18 and 50. They had a BMI of 18.5 on average and were weight stable. No history of illness, no psychiatric disease, no dietary restrictions, and they were not taking any kind of prescription medications that would influence their metabolism. The subjects were admitted as an inpatient for 28 days to the Metabolic Clinical Research Unit at the NIH Clinical Center. At the end of the diet period on study days 14 and 28, each subject completed an oral glucose tolerance test. That's a pretty cool little test too. If you've never heard of an OGTT, oral glucose tolerance test, you basically get your blood sugar tested at baseline. Then they give you this 75 grams of glucose tablet that you're supposed to just eat. And it's way sweet because it's just glucose. And then at 30 minutes postprandial, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, and 120, that's a 2-hour postprandial. Sometimes they do 3, and I've seen as far as like 6-hour postprandial. If they add in plus insulin, I think it's better data. So if you ever get an OGTT, go get it done with insulin, because you want to see, you're not caring so much just about your blood sugar. You also want to know what your insulin is doing postprandial. Now, if you're keto and you go into that OGTT, it's going to give you highly distorted data. So 3 days before you go do that test, it's going to sound weird, but stay with me here. 3 days before you do that test, you need to add back in carbs. You need to eat enough carbs that your body is used to being a glucose burner. Because what happens is, if you're keto and you're a fat burner and you go into one of those OGTTs, your body, especially if you're insulin resistant, is going to explode in blood sugar because you just gave it a huge bolus of glucose all at one time. So make sure if you ever get this OGTT and you're low carb keto, that you eat carbs 3 days leading up to that test, and it'll give you a more accurate reading. Okay, so after fasting overnight, subjects consumed the 75 grams oral glucose. We compared the CGM measurements to the glucose measurements at 0, which is baseline, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes, 90 minutes, and 120 minutes. So they got a lot of readings. 20 of the subjects wore the Dexcom G4 Platinum. 16 of them also simultaneously wore the Abbott Freestyle Libre Pro. Each device consisted of a small sensor, a transmitter, and a handheld receiver. The sensor was inserted subcutaneously, which means just beneath the skin, to measure interstitial glucose concentration. So yes, the CGMs, they don't actually test your blood like you would if you did a finger prick and you get the little drop of blood that sucks it into the little meter. That's a traditional glucometer. A CGM actually uses, like they said, the interstitial glucose concentrations, and it sends a wireless transmission to the receiver. The subjects were blinded to their glucose readings, so they had no idea what their blood sugar was doing. The Dexcom sensor was inserted in the lower abdomen, so they stuck it on their stomach. And a lot of diabetics, especially type 1 diabetics, do have it on their stomach. I've seen it on the leg as well. A lot of people use the back of their arm, but when you're a type 1 diabetic, and especially if you have both a CGM on and an insulin pump on, you kind of have to have different places all on your body to be able to put all these devices. All right, so they measured concentrations every 5 minutes per manufacturer specifications. The device was calibrated using a blood finger stick. The night sensor was changed every 7 days following the manufacturer specified lifetime. The Abbott Freestyle Libre Pro was inserted in the back of the arm, so that's where it goes in the back of the arm. And sample glucose concentrations every 15 minutes with a minimum glucose reading of 40 milligrams per deciliter. No finger stick calibrations required. The sensor was changed after 14 days. So they were in this study for 28 days. They basically had it on 14, and then they probably went to the other arm for the last 14 days of the trial. Both CGM systems were removed during MRI procedures, and the Dexcom was removed for DEXA scans once a week. The data for each monitor was downloaded at the end of each inpatient stay. So, I don't want to bore you with too much of the details because you kind of got the big gist of this study. But they looked at all of this data, guys, and they were trying to see, can you really rely on a CGM? And I want to know, by the way, how many of you have tried a continuous glucose monitor? And I would love for you to share your experience. So if you've used a continuous glucose monitor, a CGM, whether it's the Dexcom, whether it's the Freestyle Libre, whether it's the NutriSense, tell me your story down below, because I definitely want to hear how you like it, what you thought about it, if you've compared it to finger pricks, what you think the difference is, da-da-da-da-da. So go ahead and share your experience as I'm continuing to read through this study. Okay, so the results were they collected CGM data from 7 male and 9 female adult subjects without diabetes. Their average age was 31, their BMI of 26. Simultaneously monitored glucose using Dexcom G4 Platinum and the Abbott Freestyle Libre Pro while they resided at the center for 28 days. So, yeah, I mean, they're just repeating here all the, in greater detail, all the discordance that they found between the meters. And again, if you joined us late, CGMs are not supposed to be the be-all, end-all with your blood sugar. If you want the be-all, end-all, it doesn't exist. And plus, keep in mind, any reading that you take in your blood is only a snapshot in time. It's not like your blood is that way all the time. I can't tell you how many people that have just a plain glucometer, not even a CGM, just a plain glucometer will write to me and say, my blood sugar is always 110. I'm like, always? Really? So when you measure at 7 a.m., it's 110. When you measure at noon, it's 110. When you measure at 7 p.m., it's 110. Oh, no, I just measure in the mornings. Well, that's not always. That's just that point in time. This is why CGMs are so invaluable, because it gives you the ability to test over and over and over again at different times of the day so you can see how you're doing. And of course, there's the whole dawn phenomenon, Shimoji effect, physiologic insulin resistance, glucose sparing effect, whatever you want to call it. But it's basically what it is describing that you have higher blood sugar levels in the morning. And people freak out about that. And I actually recently had a guest on one of my podcasts. It'll be airing here soon. And he said, oh, it's good to have a higher glucose level in the morning if you're keto, because there's so many glucose dependent functions of the body. It fulfills all of those functions, and then it clears out of the body and you've got normal blood sugar. So if you are one of those people that test your blood sugar only in the mornings, and you're, oh my God, it's always so high. I thought keto was supposed to make your blood sugar low. Well, guess what? Test again at noon. Test again at 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Just test again, and you'll see it's not what you think it is. You're only getting one time a day. That would be like going out on the street in the morning, driving your car on the roads at 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. And that's the only time you ever go out on the roads. You'll be like, man, it is always packed with traffic out here. Oh my gosh, who would ever ride on the interstate, especially if you live like in a congested area like LA or Washington, D.C. or Atlanta. Oh my God, who would ever go on the roads? It's always packed. And then you find out they only go out at 7:30 or 8 in the morning. Well, no wonder. That's the worst time to go. And in the morning time, testing your blood sugar could be, for some people, the worst time to check to see how it is, because the rest of the day, it's usually in the 70s and 80s. But because that one reading in the morning freaks people out, they think the traffic is congested on the interstate all the time. See where I'm going there? So we need to use these as tools. All right, let's see if I can wrap this up here, because they have a lot of, the detail here is just in the weeds, because they're just basically saying they're not the same. They don't really have any kind of correlation with one another. To which I say, yeah, the Dexcom is way incomplete. The Freestyle Libre is a little better, but at the end, you have to use these as tools. So the discussion, different ad libitum meals, again, eating as much as you want, resulted in a wide range of postprandial after meal glucose responses regardless of the CGM. However, the within subject rankings of the same meals according to one CGM did not necessarily correspond to the rankings measured simultaneously by the other. Again, they're not the same device. You need apples to apples comparison. That's a horrible analogy for a keto guy. You need steak to steak comparison so that you get accurate results with the same meter. You don't want to test one meter against the other meter and think they are supposed to be the same. They're just not. And again, I've used tons of devices over the years, and it's just never going to work that way. That's what would have been really cool for them to experiment with is Freestyle Libre here, Freestyle Libre there, and then compare those two. Because it's the same device, you would expect them to be the same. Now, if there was discordance between those meters, that, Kevin Hall, would have been an interesting study. That's not the study he did, though. It isn't. We found substantial differences in glycemic responses that depended on the CGM used to make the meal rankings. The difference in the glycemic response between the top half of meals compared to the bottom half of meals ranked by one CGM was significantly greater, blah, 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 blah. The reason for the differences in meal ranking according to the CGM are unclear. The different anatomical locations of the CGM sensors and the influence of subcutaneous fat on interstitial glucose may have played a role. So here's an interesting little part. They did it on their stomachs, you guys. Now remember, these were people that were in their low 30s by average. They're relatively healthy, so they didn't have any disease, none of that stuff. So you wouldn't think that they would be fat. In fact, their BMI was that they weren't. And so they're saying in the conclusion here, the discussion here, that where the CGM was might have impacted the blood sugar. And let that be a word to the wise too. The Dexcom has to go in the belly. The CGM by Abbott, the Freestyle Libre, the one everybody kind of uses, goes in the arm. Now there's a little bit of fat on the backside of your arm. That's why it's a good place to go, because it goes in and it stays there. But that's very interesting that they're saying where it went played a role because of the subcutaneous fat that was there, and it wasn't able to get to the interstitial glucose as accurately possibly. Previous studies have demonstrated that simultaneous glucose measurements at different anatomical locations can indicate distinct glucose kinetics. In other words, they already know that if you put it on different parts of your body, you're going to get different readings. Wouldn't it be funny if they did a study where they put the exact same meter, let's say Freestyle Libre, one here, one on the belly, one on the leg, all over? Oh, I feel for that person that has to have all these needles all in their body, but I would sign up for that just to show that the different parts of the body do provide different glucose. But again, I'm going to go back to a key thing I said earlier. You're not looking for an absolute number. What you're looking for is the change, the relative change. So if you start at 75 and post-meal it goes up to 110, okay, that's an interesting relative change to see. Who cares if it actually was 90, not 75, and if the 110 was actually 125? It's still, the relative change is pretty constant. So pretending like it's not valuable, which is what they're concluding, claiming that CGMs are too imprecise to give any relevant blood sugar data, is just nonsense. You're not looking for that level of meticulousness in the accuracy. It's accurate enough to give you that relative change. Perhaps random variation in the glucose measurements, performance differences between the CGMs, or a combination thereof were responsible for the discordance. Yeah, I found the Dexcom to be incredibly off. Sometimes I would do the reading with the Dexcom and it was just 45 points off. It was horrible. I hated that thing, and it was very expensive to get one, but I got one thanks to some doctor friends. I hated it and I stopped using it. I still have it over there in my other building, but I don't use it. I love the Freestyle Libre. And if I can ever try the NutriSense, I'll probably like that one as well. I think these ones that you can stick in your arm, and they're going to get more sophisticated, you guys, the longer they're out. The needle is very thin now. When they first got them, it was a little thicker than it is now. But you push it in and it goes right into the arm. Does not hurt. It's just like a little bit of a pinch. And most of that is where the adhesive goes on and it just sticks to your arm really strongly, because you don't want that thing coming off. I did have that happen one time. I got really sweaty when I was working out, and the adhesive started to come out, and next thing I know, it's just dangling with the needle right there, and I had to just rip it off. So that does happen, but it's rare. And of course, they have things that you can put over the top of them to help adhese it a little stronger. Our results have implications on precision nutrition approaches that seek to personalize a person's diet. An implicit assumption that has not previously been investigated is that the ranking of an individual's meals by glycemic response is relatively independent of the CGM. Our results suggest that this assumption may be incorrect, at least in people without diabetes. And again, this is an important study because they're testing blood sugar in people that don't have blood sugar dysregulation to the degree of type 2 diabetes. Some of these people, and I would dare say probably a lot of these people, probably do have some level of insulin resistance. We know a good 87% of the population, according to one study, has some level of insulin resistance metabolic derangement. So some very minor, some extremely bad. Precision nutrition approaches seeking to personalize meals to minimize glycemic responses via one CGM may not necessarily recommend the same meals according to another CGM. Again, the discordance. More research is needed. Misclassifying meals as either good or bad in terms of their CGM response may affect overall eating behaviors with potentially deleterious consequences. I don't think you label foods as good or bad. I think you look at, even with the Dexcom, let's say it started at 75 as a blood sugar, and then you eat something and it jumps to 145. Do you think that food was good for you? No matter the accuracy, no matter if it's discordant with the CGM from Abbott, the Freestyle Libre, if there's that big of a jump, is that not instructive to you that that food is not good for you to be consuming? Of course it is. Of course it's invaluable information, but they're invalidating it because, oh, it doesn't match up with another CGM, so it has potentially deleterious consequences. Well, you're not moving the earth here. These people aren't type 2 diabetic and going to have an A1C go out of control. It showed you the relative change, and that's invaluable information. All right, so that's the study, you guys. Again, it was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition, a highly respected journal. A couple weeks ago that it came out, called Imprecision Nutrition. Different simultaneous continuous glucose monitors provide discordant meal rankings for incremental postprandial glucose in subjects without diabetes. Kevin Hall, this is what happens when you have tainted researchers, when you have researchers that have an agenda. His agenda is promoting the calorie hypothesis, and he works right at the NIH, you guys. And when you've got those kinds of people in there, and keep in mind, Kevin Hall was one of the people that got the research money from NUSI, the Nutrition Science Initiative, that was trying to get low-carb research done. And Kevin Hall took the money, said, sure, I'll do your study, and then completely did his own thing, went rogue with the research, and concluded the same thing he has concluded in every other research paper he ever did. The guy does not like the insulin hypothesis. And so somebody that does not believe in the insulin hypothesis and believes in the calorie hypothesis, why does he care what your blood sugar is? And the answer is he doesn't. So take that. When you're reading a study like this, you need to know researcher and their bias, who funded it, and in this case, the NIH funded it. And it didn't really tell us anything about CGMs. I, for one, happen to think CGMs are the wave of the future. If we could get CGMs available over the counter, anybody can go down to their Walgreens, CVS, or whatever your local pharmacy drugstore is and pick one up, and then make them more affordable. Right now, $70 for a sensor is pretty expensive. I think the NutriSense one, I think, is a little cheaper, but not much. And it's such invaluable information. If you're not currently using a CGM, can I encourage you to give it a go and see how it helps you? At least it would be instructive as to what's going on with your blood sugar. All right, let's see what you guys have to say. We're going to come over here to Instagram first, then over to Facebook, finally over to YouTube. Thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. Yo, what up, Jonathan? Thanks for being here, man. Hello, Holly. She said, I got my labs back. Love to send them to you so you can see them. Yeah, send them through DM. I'll be happy to take a look at your labs. Very interesting. I wish I could get a CGM, says Patty. Well, Patty, I know you live here where I do in Spartanburg. Try to find a doctor locally. Like, I don't know who your doctor is locally here in Spartanburg, but just tell them, hey, you heard about these continuous glucose monitors. You realize you have to pay out of pocket for it, but can you prescribe me a sensor? I have a guy up in Asheville who prescribes me my sensors, and whenever I need them, he'll write me a prescription for 5 of them. So I go down to the pharmacy and I fill that 5 continuous glucose monitors, $70 a piece. So yes, $350 when I do that, but then I've got all these things to pop in my arm whenever I want to, and can test the blood sugar just to see how I'm doing. The interesting thing is, once you do it a few times and you kind of see how things work, you've dialed in your diet to keep your glucose managed. And so you don't have to keep testing all the time, but test initially to say, okay, I think I can handle a sweet potato, for example, and it'll tell you right away whether you handled it or not. Within 2 hours, you will know. Or if you're like on a carnivore diet and you're worried about too much protein, what's that doing to my blood glucose? Again, a CGM would definitely give you that data. But if you can't get help with that, Patty, and trying to find someone locally, I know Carb Addiction Doc, Dr. Robert Siwis, has said anybody that wants one, if you're within his jurisdiction to write you a prescription, he will write you a prescription for them. But a lot of people will do that for you. Kelly says NutriSense is $250 a month. Okay, thanks for that. They also do more than just provide the sensors. I think they do a lot of support with your diet as well. They also do, I guess, in-house calls where you can talk to someone about kind of tweaking things. They also have a very sophisticated app which gives you all kinds of graphs and things with it. So yeah, I mean, it's hefty in price, but definitely it's data that if you can afford it, worth having. All right, thank you, Instagram. Let me pop over here to my Facebook page. What's up, Facebook? Thanks for being here today on Jimmy Rants. Rob says, I think if you are diabetic, you can set the calibration using normal finger prick tests. Yes. He's talking about with the Dexcom. The Dexcom, though, is I still have a hate relationship with that device. Even with the finger pricks every day, it always seemed to veer way off course. It was almost like, okay, you test and it was 82, and it just kind of lingered around 82. It never really gave you any data, even postprandial. It just didn't do anything. Sometimes I would just like tweak these things when I didn't think they were accurate and really like testing my blood sugar. I would eat like something I know I'm not supposed to eat just to get it to rise. It rises, so then you know, okay, it works. Rob says NutriSense uses its own app with a freestyle arm tag. We did a mini store experiment a few weeks ago. The arm tags are costly if you are just doing as a non-diabetic? Oh, Mind Store. So, yeah. What'd you put? Men's Store? Ryan says, I've used a CGM for the last decade. Yeah, Ryan, you are one of the experts when it comes to CGMs. I've loved following your work about this for many years. He says the newest one, Dexcom G6, is very accurate if you are in the normal range. If I verify, it's usually right on. When it gets very high, it can be off. Anytime I'm out of range, I'll verify with a finger stick, but in general, it's pretty accurate. Well, maybe I need to try the G6. I do love the Freestyle Libre, so if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It is FDA approved, talking about the Dexcom G6, to use without finger stick, but I never think it's a good idea for anyone with diabetes. Always verify with the finger stick if you are taking any action with insulin or glucose. That's true. Another issue with CGM is hydration. Thank you for bringing that up. And Dilly. Yes, hydration does matter because the more dehydrated you are, the more concentrated your blood is, the higher blood glucose reading is going to be. So people don't even think about that aspect. Or if you're overhydrated, it could dilute what the actual reading is as well. So all that does come into play. Since it is monitoring interstitial fluid, if you're dehydrated, it can show a higher level than your actual blood sugar is. Ryan, I'm so glad you came on here today. Thank you for giving your expertise. And yes, I love your work, man. Keep it up. Tracy says, I found that excess carbs or sugar cause hypoglycemia in me now. I'm very careful to ask questions and read labels. Yeah, because otherwise you'll know. You will know. Ryan had one other comment. It's important to know that the continuous glucose monitor measuring interstitial fluid is about 20 to 30 minutes behind the blood sugar. Just something to keep in mind. That's interesting because people think it's real-time data, and that's interesting. There is a lag of about 20 to 30 minutes. So if you test your blood sugar with a finger prick and it says 85, but then your CGM says like 75. So in other words, it hasn't caught up to what that, especially post-meal kind of reading would be. That's really interesting. I did not know that, Ryan. You taught me something today. Thank you for that. Tracy says, Dr. Jason Fung said insulin is always a little higher in the morning. It was because your body pumps out insulin to get the body moving after sleep. The Diabetes Code was a very good book. Yes, insulin and thus blood sugar also both go higher. It's connected to the cortisol response that helps to wake you up in the morning. So he is exactly correct. Ryan wants to know which one I had the issue with. It's the G4. And so thank you again for letting me know the G6, the Dexcom G6 is better. That's awesome. Rob said Jack Mind Store, the guy I was on a podcast with last week. Yes, I was. He was awesome. All right. Thank you, Facebook. Let me pop over here now to my YouTube channel. Always have fun conversations on YouTube. Shirley says, hello. Just finished watching your interview or basically the video that I posted of Nevada Gray. Hello, Mike. Lee says, I've used Dexcom G6. It matched my A1C perfectly. That's awesome. He said, let my doctor know that my blood sugar was dropping in the night when I sleep. Oh, that's interesting. Got a little bit of hypoglycemia going on while you sleep. That's not rare, by the way. I hear a lot of people deal with that. United Insurance provides for free in their level 2 program, talking about CGM. Dexcom G6 is new. I think it has improved a lot. Yes, that's what Ryan was just saying. Uses the tummy unless you are under 18. Steven says NutriSense uses the Freestyle Libre, works good for me. One was off and had to adjust it. Shirley says, this guy again, referring to Kevin Hall. Yes, Kevin just can't resist doing these studies that don't really help people too much. Steven says, CGM versus finger prick, there is a lag. Yes, you are basically, Steven, mimicking everything that Ryan has already said over here on Facebook. I've done that, eating the wrong thing to see if it works. Yes, Lee, I think we all do that because after a while when you eat keto or carnivore and the blood sugar isn't moving a bit, you're like, hello, is this thing working? And then you eat something you're not supposed to, and shoo, and you're like, okay, yep, it's working. Shoot, dang it. Then you have to live with the hyperglycemia, and for some people it goes up and then it goes way down, and you get hypo, and yeah, not good. Don't do that by design. Holly says, I'm not tech savvy. How do I DM you? Basically, if you go on my page and hit the little message, so I'm at Living Low Carb Man. So if you click on my little username at the top, it'll take you straight to my page. Click on the message and it'll take you straight to where you can send me a message. I'm always surprised by people like yourself, Holly, how you're on social media, and some of the things I guess I take for granted are a little hard, but I'm happy to help whenever non-techie people get on here and ask questions. Joshua says, I was thinking, man, I need to buy some of your books, and then I realized that you wrote The Complete Guide to Fasting. I did write The Complete Guide to Fasting. With Dr. Jason Fung, of course. All right, guys, so CGMs, use them. No matter what this study from a very biased researcher who does not believe in the insulin hypothesis, he doesn't want you testing your blood sugar, so why would he say something good about a blood sugar device like a continuous glucose monitor? Kevin Hall, you should be ashamed of yourself. But we like to highlight these on Jimmy Rants for your edification. That's it for this episode of Jimmy Rants. JimmyRants.com is the website. And as always, you can engage live in the content. Go follow me right here on Instagram. I'm at Living Low Carb Man, LIVINLOWCARBMAN. Once you're there, engage live. We're here Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We also simulcast over here on my Facebook page as well as on my YouTube channel. Thank you all for being here today on Jimmy Rants. You missed the live, you can watch it on replay right here on IGTV, so check it out. We also throw all the past episodes up over on YouTube. Type in a keyword, Jimmy Rants, you will find the show. Finally, pop over to JimmyRants.com. It's the official website for this show. You can see all the past episodes there as well. And most importantly, if you like what I do here, you like the cutting edge information I share with you here on the show, click on the Patreon link, and really a donation of any amount would be greatly appreciated. All right, guys, I'm out of here for now. Thanks for watching today, and we'll see you tomorrow for more Jimmy Rants. Bye.